Well, great. Thanks all for coming out tonight. We are so excited to have, I think, our fourth installment of this series, Talking Archaeology. Chris, our director, Chris Habig, is not here tonight. He's at another event representing the museum. So I'm going to introduce our speaker of the night, Paul. My name's Olivia, and I'm the Public Programs Manager here at Lake Champlain Maritime Museum, but I have the pleasure of introducing Paul. Paul Gates is a co-director of archaeology at Lake Champlain Maritime Museum. He's an experienced archaeologist with an in-depth background in maritime archaeology and cultural resource management. He focuses in the New England and Mid-Atlantic region of the United States and is a registered professional archaeologist, RPA, if that certification means something to you, and a certified scientific diver with the American Academy of Underwater Sciences. Paul earned his Master of Arts, focused in maritime studies from East Carolina University, and a Master of Science in historic preservation from the University of Vermont. We are very lucky to have Paul working at our museum, and we're happy to have him speak with us tonight about what an underwater archaeologist does. Please help me welcome Paul Gates.
Thank you again, Olivia. Thank you, Will. Thank you, Lauren, for being here. And thank you, the public, as well, for making it. And I guess, I don't know, are we supporting Shaftesbury Cider? Is this?
They support us.
They support us. And also, thanks to Shaftesbury Cider for presenting us with lovely zero-proof and non-zero-proof alcoholic beverages. So, without further ado, salute, cheers to anyone who knows anything from them, and let's begin. So, you want to be an underwater archaeologist. What it takes to be in the profession and dive in Lake Champlain. The first few slides are actually going to be a bit of a repeat of what Olivia has already talked about for my background, but it shouldn't take too long to go through it. So just a bit about me. In my younger days, when I was in high school, I started doing some internships and volunteering in Chester County, Pennsylvania for museums, specifically in collections management. For college, I went to University of Vermont right here, and stayed up in Burlington for my BA in history with a minor in archaeology from 2003 to 2007. And then, during that time, I was actually in terrestrial archaeology. So I was a dirt digger. And it wasn't until I interned with the Maritime Museum in 2008 that I really got interested in underwater archaeology, also known as maritime archaeology, nautical archaeology. They're all interchangeable, but they essentially mean the same thing. After volunteering and working with the museum for a while, I went to University of Vermont for the Historic Preservation Program, 2014. And then immediately right after 2016, I went to ECU for Maritime Studies. And for a while after that, I worked at ECU, mostly as a teaching assistant, an aide to my advisor, Nathan Richards, and then did some work in corporate archaeology, and was hired back here. So I'm very happy to be here in this wonderful institution. And going back a little bit further, this is actually most of my graduating class from ECU. This is a class of 2016. I'm sure I'm in there somewhere. Not in the middle, that's Stephen Lacey, the guy who's not smiling. But so yeah, a little bit about me. When I was younger as a kid, I grew up on a farm in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania for part of my life. And the farm was actually an 18th century farm. It still had ruins in it. It had a graveyard kind of further up in one part of the woods. One of the graves there had a Revolutionary War marker commemorating the service of somebody who had died and was buried there from the 1780s. And I would just go around as a kid collecting things. I had a little bucket and a shovel, and I would dig up glass fragments from old barn remains. I found other artifacts of interest like nails, tools, things like that. You know, it was really fun to do as a kid. And I knew that I wanted to continue studying history with archaeology when I was older, so when I went to UVM, I studied under a couple of these professors here in the anthropology and history department. My very first archaeology field school was in the British West Indies on a really tiny island called Anguilla. Very beautiful island. If you ever have vacation and chance to go down there, I highly suggest it. And that was actually through the University of Vermont, specifically through the Consulting Archaeology program. So the CAP program does anything and everything archaeology in the state of Vermont. They do a lot of consultation work and also teach field schools as well for UVM undergrads. Again, I interned with CAP from 2007 to 2008. Interned at the Maritime Museum 2008-2009. Was hired, I believe, in 2011. And first underwater archaeology field school was in the Pine Street Barge Canal, Breakwater Basin with the museum. And again, I just kind of grew from there from my grad programs. Now I have archaeology experience Bermuda, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Michigan, Illinois, Carolinas, New York, and right here in Vermont. Are any of you familiar with Gary Larson, Far Side Cartoon? I love his anthropology jokes. So anyways, I thought it'd be best just to kind of give a couple of definitions for what archaeology is. I'm sure the crowd here is very familiar with it, but just kind of looking up at Merriam-Webster's definition, it is, quote, the scientific study of material remains, such as tools, pottery, jewelry, stone walls, and monuments, of past human life and activities. More of a detailed definition from the Society for the American Archaeologist here in 2025. It is, quote, archaeology is the study of ancient and recent human past through material remains. Archaeologists might study million-year-old fossils related to our earliest ancestors in Africa, or they may study 20th century buildings in present-day New York City. Archaeology analyzes the physical remains of the past in pursuit of a broad and comprehensive understanding of human culture, unquote. And it's a subfield of anthropology. Within anthropology, there's other subfields with archaeology, such as biological anthropology, linguistic anthropology, sociocultural anthropology, and then I could kind of go on and hopefully not bore you all with different subfields that are in archaeology. And now, some of you laugh, we don't dig dinosaurs. That's the job of a paleontologist. And to get into maritime archaeology, here are some wonderful maritime archaeologists right here. This is actually our other co-director, Sherilyn Gilligan, up at the top left. One of my colleagues and best friends, George Huss, over there on the far right, and me at the bottom. And this is us working at my thesis site up in Burlington at the Pine Street Barge Canal Ship Graveyard. And so for Noah's definition of maritime archaeology, it's the study of past human cultures with an emphasis on humans interacted in the world's oceans, lakes, and river systems. It is used to interpret the material remains of these cultures, including ships and small craft, their crews and cargoes, and their shore-based facilities. And now, while maritime archaeology is best known for its focus on shipwrecks, we are also concerned with anything and anything seafaring, lakefaring, riverfaring, anything that has to deal with people in connection to water. And other aspects such as technology, social, economic, political, and religious topics. And now I'll try not to, hopefully not I don't know, don't be inundated by all of this. This is a lot of information. But just to kind of delve further into maritime archaeology, and one of the biggest things that we do here, especially at the Maritime Museum, is underwater cultural resource management. So what is it? If you go online to the National Park Service, you can find this bulletin for number 28 on cultural resource management guidelines. And basically what we do is we research to identify, evaluate, document, register, and establish other basic information about cultural resources. We also plan to ensure that this information is well integrated into management processes for making decisions and setting priorities. And then finally, stewardship, which I believe is one of the many things that this museum excels at, under which planning decisions are carried out, and resources are preserved, protected, and interpreted for you, the public. What could be better? And maybe this really wasn't the best color to use for the background here, but in this sphere of underwater cultural resource management, this was modified by a gentleman named Joseph Flatman, along with myself, in basically what is cultural resource management, and then what are the other related topics that are involved with it. And it's pretty dense. It's everything from conservation specialists, historic preservationists, people that do public relations, GIS surveyors, so people who understand global information systems, a lot of management, both at the local level, state level, federal level, and really many other different spheres that are involved with it. So as you can imagine, just by looking at all these here, if you have one big project and all these people combined together, it can be pretty dense. It can actually be very complex. And to further talk more about what underwater cultural resource management is, and especially how the Lake Champlain Maritime Museum is involved, mostly we're involved with doing a lot of contract work in the world of underwater archaeology. So companies will come to us that have a cultural resource component to their project, and what we do is we help to provide support for projects that have energy, transportation, and infrastructure work. It's a requirement for both state and federal guidelines as well to be doing this type of work. And it also really feeds into Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act. So how do we save history? Why do we save history? Especially with historic buildings or maritime resources. Why are they important and what can we do? And all the archaeologists here adhere to federal standards for qualifications. So if you have any work or anything that you're interested in learning more, feel free to reach out to us and we'll help you the best way that we can. And here are just some examples of work that we've done. What does it take to do underwater archaeology, especially here at the Maritime Museum? We've already mentioned the Pine Street Barge Canal. The museum in the past has done work to document abandoned vessels within the canal itself, within the turning basin. We surveyed the Champlain Bridge before it was demoed and the new bridge was put in. We've done a lot of Superfund work, so sites that have a toxic history, a toxic legacy, they might be contaminated with things that are detrimental to the environment, but also have archaeological resources that need to be documented as well. Mountain Shipyard, that was a pretty big project. We worked with New York State Canal Corporation, which we'll talk a little bit about more later on. And also working in other parts of New York, like Rockaway, Flushing, New York, and some of the other areas around Brooklyn and Bronx. So how can you, the public, or people who may be watching at home once we put this video up, become an archaeologist? Specifically an underwater archaeologist. You can see these happy divers here with the Waterfront Dive Center. It is literally in our backyard, right up north in Burlington. Please go check them out. learn how to scuba, learn how to dive. You can get this type of certification from different agencies. There are dive shops around the world, dive shops around the United States, and they have varying levels of training and certifications. So if you want to do advanced courses, if you want to learn how to ice dive, if you want to do rescue diving, the sky's not exactly the limit, but there are many options. And here are some other ways that you can get involved. Obviously, it helps if you have an interest in the field. And then also realize, again, archaeology and underwater archaeology, these are really interdisciplinary fields. So not only are you looking at human past, human history, the tools, the things that we have used, but it also crosses in with biology, conservation, I mentioned GIS earlier, history, historic preservation, and many, many other disciplines. You can spend hours reading up on any of these topics and still find more information that is exciting, makes you curious, and if you really enjoy learning, wanting to learn more. We have avocational opportunities and volunteer opportunities here in the state of Vermont, specifically with the Vermont Archaeological Society. So please look them up online for any volunteer and avocational opportunities. There are some professional programs like the Advanced Metal Detecting for the Archaeologist that you can be involved with. Here is some of the museum archaeology staff with people from Fort Ticonderoga and folks from all the United States doing our metal detecting course literally last year. And if you want to begin professional archaeology and programs and coursework, you really need a higher education. I cannot stress that enough. Even if you're going into undergrad, you have options. I mentioned before that the University of Vermont Consulting Archaeology Program, they really do their best to support undergraduates who are interested in archaeology and dirt digging. We have had field schools here in the past. Hopefully we have more field schools in the future. And then of course for higher education, such as graduate studies or PhDs, this is just a small list of the universities that we have, not only here in the US, but also worldwide as well. And they all vary with their course offerings and opportunities. And now at this juncture, what does it take to do archaeology? What does it take to be involved? What I really want to be doing is going through case studies just to show the audience and everybody who may be watching later online of some of the work that the museum has done, specifically in cultural resource management, and just how in-depth it can be. So here's a project that we worked on. It's a super fun project in Fort Edward. PCB's project, right along Fort Edward, I believe kind of further north, which would be this way. Back in the 1940s, General Electric had a battery capacitor plant that made batteries. And one of the byproducts was PCBs, or polychlorinated biphenyls. PCBs, there we go, it's a mouthful. And there was no EPA in the 1940s. There were no regulatory standards for dumping toxic waste or anything like that. So what GE did was they pumped about 1.5 plus million pounds of this stuff into the Hudson River. Lo and behold, as years went on, environmental contamination started to show up in the ecology. People who were swimming in the river around Fort Edward began breaking out in these weird rashes. People got sick. And so part of the project, we worked with the EPA in order to do a memorandum of agreement, which is basically a large document that says in order to remediate any toxic legacies or Superfund sites, you have to do X, Y, and Z. And a lot of that we did was mapping out the remains of the old Champlain Canal, which, as you can see, coming right here, going up, and then eventually connecting out to the Erie Canal system. So we looked at the remains of the feeder dam, the original locks, anything that was around, and I know that this is pretty complicated, but there were at least over, I want to say, 60 plus historic sites that we identified solely in the village of Fort Edward alone. Oops, a little fast there. Here is one of those historic resources. This is the Bond Creek Aqueduct that the Fort Edward Historical Association very kindly gave us permission to use. And this is the aqueduct from about 1900. And then when we were doing work here in 2013, this is the remains. It's actually still in really good shape. There's still a lot of the original canal path located up here, and the infrastructure just kept going. Here's another example of the junction lock. So this lock, which is now mostly buried, these are the top walls of the lock, was created to juncture the new barge canal system that was made in the 19-teens to the older Champlain canal system that was still being used. And I think that this is just a really good comparison of just the amount of construction, all the laborers, people digging by hand in order to get the lock system in place. And then fast forward over 100 years, and this is all that remains of this part of this infrastructure. But again, it's history, it's important, it's related to maritime archaeology as well. You know, we wanted to document these features so that we had a record. Another part of this project, we actually encountered remains. I don't know if you can see in these two photos here, can't really see it here, but these are bastion timber remains, meaning they are the foundational remains of timbers that were used for Fort Edward. So Fort Edward has a long history. It was raised up in the middle of the 18th century. It went through different variations, and it's underwater now. How did this happen? Climate change, changing rivers, who knows? But what we had to do with part of this project is because this was exposed, we had to do more remediation. We didn't want the rest of it to become contaminated by the PCBs, so we sent in our divers here in full kit, you know, per EPA standards, in order to dive in the not so, you know, appealing river and do documentation. Eventually, the museum conserved these timbers, and if you go to Rogers Island in Fort Edward, you can see it on display at their visitor center there. And next up, this has got a bit of an audio. Part of our project had to work with oral history. So interviewing people that were still alive that had experience in working on not only the barge canal system, but really the Champlain, the old Champlain canal system. And it was difficult to find people who were still around. And lo and behold, we actually got a hold of this gentleman. Material, and you want to coat it fully so that it's basically inhibited from any further oxidization or any further rusting. Last step is we heat up a vat of hot microcrystalline wax to about 300 degrees Fahrenheit, and then using a little tray, you put the artifact in, you let it boil. And what this does is it dehydrates the artifact. There's still water not only on the outside, but contained deep within on a cellular level of the artifact. So as you put this into the vat, it literally starts bubbling and boiling. And just as long as there are bubbles coming up, you know it's still dehydrating. If it's done bubbling, there's no more water inside of it. And then you remove the artifact, you pat it dry of any excess microcrystalline wax, and then you give it back to the owner or to the institution that you're working for, whoever, with complete documentation. And as you can see, this is one very happy member of the public that was enthused to get this back. Fully conserved. This will probably last another 100+ years. Another case study that I want to go through is work that we did with New York State Canal Corporation. And again, this is just one of many skill sets and things and knowledge bases that archaeologists and underwater archaeologists really need to adapt to and learn from to build up their work and their work ethics. So we worked for New York State Canal Corporation in 2019, documenting their historic fleet. They had over 76 identified watercraft, 10 distinct vessels, and this vessel right here is one of my favorite classes. It's called a buoy bill. So this is, I believe, out by Mohawk in New York State. This vessel would have been used to tend all the buoys on the canal system before they became electrified and automated. They were originally kerosene buoys that had lights on them. And through research and documentation, we were provided with specs, engineers, drawings, schematics, everything so that we could have a good idea of what some of these vessels looked like before they were fully modified and employed in the fleet of New York State Canal Corporation. Here's another vessel. You can see this out in Lyons, New York, at the floating plant for New York State Canal Corporation. This is dipper dredge number 3, also originally formerly known as St. Johnsville. And this is the only surviving known example of a steam-powered hydraulic dredge. It is on the National Register of Historic Places. It was used pretty much from 1909 to 1957 until it could no longer be maintained, and they put it on hard, as you will, and they're doing their best to try to conserve it, keep it in good shape, and maintain the vessel. Here's another vessel type that we were able to work on. These are hydraulic dredges. Originally, they're steam-powered before they went over to from coal to oil or fully to diesel. And basically, we documented the historic dredges, what they look like today, some of the historic machinery that's still extant, and then this thing right here, which was actually the cutting head, which would be used to dredge out the bottom of river environments. And again, the whole idea with this project was to document the historic fleet, see how much original parts and pieces that the vessels had, so that if we could nominate more to the National Register or further save, then we could do that based off of the integrity that they have. Last but not least, here's one more vessel, a tender. It's like a step below tug. We were able to get a lot of documentation on this vessel as well, and other ones. And then some of the public might know this vessel. This is Urger. So this is the oldest steam tug in the New York State Canal Corporation fleet. It's also on their NRHP. It's not used anymore, but as you can see, this is what it used to be beforehand when it was known as the HIA Dornbos. Then New York State Canal Corporation bought it, renamed it Urger. As you can see, there's been different modifications to the superstructure, and these are all things that we literally had to document when they happened year by year with any available historic information that we had. So a lot of historic research, a lot of writing, more research, and then to wrap things up, here's another case study of something that some people here might be familiar with, the Champlain Hudson Power Express project. We are on contract with the larger Chippy team and a company called TRC Corporations in order to identify any and all historic resources and shipwrecks in Lake Champlain, the Hudson River, and then the Harlem River, so that we could help to protect them. And there's just some information about what the project is and what it's doing. This shows the complete route from the border of Canada along the New York side in New York State waters, all the way down to Port Kent, Lewisboro, West Point, and down to Putnam Station. So we had to evaluate that whole waterway to see what shipwrecks and other underwater cultural resources might have been in the path of this power line project. This is pretty dense, you don't have to read it all, but this just goes to show how much technology went into this project and continues to go into this project. This is one of the survey vessels that we used in Lake Champlain from OSI, or Ocean Survey, I think it's Ocean Surveys Incorporated, yes. And they just had this massive complement onboard navigation system, side scan sonar, magnetometer, multi-beam sonar, all these really amazing pieces of equipment and technology that gave us a lot of data and a lot of information that you can actually see here. So this is remains of the Great Bridge that went between Fort Ticonderoga and Mount Independence, I believe, on the Vermont side. And initially, the path of the cable was going right through one of these caissons. This right here is information from Scott McLaughlin, who used to work here at the Lake Champlain Maritime Museum, a very amazing underwater archaeologist. And so these were identified on both magnetometer and then side scan sonar. So this little triangle here, that's a magnetic signature. This square here, that's a sonar target. And so we had to look to historic research, information about these caissons in order to reroute the power line so it wasn't directly going through these, but rather through the middle. Here's another interesting part of the project that we worked on, still in Lake Champlain. And are any of you familiar with the Larrabee's Point train trestle at all? There used to be one of two train trestles that went across Lake Champlain from Vermont to New York. One of them was up by Rouse's Point up north, and then the other one is a little bit further south. I think it's around Fort Ticonderoga. And literally, it was a train track going across Lake Champlain. And the cool thing about this train track system is they had this big floating draw boat. This steam-powered vessel could basically be swung out of the way so that any steamships, canal boats, vessels could basically transit and navigate through the middle of this train trestle without having impeded navigation. And sure enough, as we were reviewing the sonar data and analyzing it for this project, we found the remains of here, the draw boat. This thing is about 300 feet long. We found a lot of obstructions and targets related to the remains of the train trestle, mostly pilings and foundational items. And it's just literally chock full of magnetic signatures, sonar signatures here. Most of them are rocks, but a good number of these are related to this whole historic resource here. And remember when I said that in order to open this, it would swing out? That is the scar that this draw boat left at the bottom of Lake Champlain. Anytime it was opening up, anytime it was closing, it just created this massive depression. And that in itself is pretty significant. That is direct evidence showing, hey, this is how this draw boat worked. This is what it did. These are the remains. These are the resources. What could be better? So without further ado, thank you for coming here to Lake Champlain Maritime Museum. On behalf of all of our staff here and volunteers, we appreciate it. Now's the time to wrap up the presentation and to open up the floor to questions and discussion. Any questions? Anything at all?
I'm amazed you swam in the barge canal.
I'm a little hard of hearing, so you have to speak up for me.
Yeah. I'm amazed that you swam in the barge canal. I've always heard that was,
I didn't swim in there. No, geez, I haven't done that. No, not yet. But documenting it with the features with the old Champlain Canal, that was also pretty amazing. So our executive director, Chris Sabick, he was the one in that photo in the Hudson River. Any comments, any questions? Yes, Bob?
I've seen a picture of a train that was like submerged in the lake or crashing into the lake. Was it off of one of those train trestles? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I believe that you are correct, yeah. I believe that that was part of the Larrabee's Point, Willows Point train trestle. In the early days, it had a couple of accidents. And what Will's referring to is this photo from the 1870s, like 1880s.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
It's an older photograph, and it shows, I believe during the winter when there's ice on the lake, a train had derailed and it just became stuck halfway in the ice and halfway in the lake. I have no idea how they got it out. Yes, ma'am.
We've got a lot of stuff in New York. Is there untouched or unseen stuff on the Vermont side? If we started looking
I mean, there are, like, I haven't, gone through many Vermont
at,
examples.
I don't mean just you, but it's just
No. No, it's okay, no worries. Actually, it's a very good question. I mean, yes, there's.
Bob,
Yep.
can you repeat the question? I think.
Oh, I was just wondering if there was as much as to be found on the Vermont side of Lake Champlain, essentially.
Yeah. I mean, there's dozens and dozens of canal boats at the bottom of Lake Champlain, both on the Vermont side, on the New York side. If you're familiar with the Shelburne Steamboat shipyard, they have a ship graveyard out there with at least, I believe, 5 or 6 known historic steamboats that were sunk and scuttled there. Even like on shore, if you are familiar with the Coast Guard station up in Burlington, that pier that goes out right by the station, underneath all that fill is the remains of a canal boat. Canal boats, and this dates back to hundreds of years ago. If you had a derelict vessel and it no longer served any good function, it couldn't sail, couldn't operate, they'd either be put in scrap yards, they'd be put in ship graveyards, or they'd be used as pier extensions. So they would fill these things with rocks and cribbing, and then just put more fill on top of it, and then boom, you have a new pier. Any other comments? Did you all want to look at some of the previous photographs? More than happy to continue going.
I have a science people are writing underwater.
Yeah.
How did that work?
You can write underwater, yes, you can. What we do is we use Mylar. So we use a clipboard, a sheet of Mylar, a bunch of duct tape, and you duct tape the Mylar sheet to the clipboard so you seal it from any water getting underneath. And then using just a pencil, usually mechanical pencils, because like you can just get fresher lead rather than having to whittle a pencil underwater to continue writing. That's how we take notes. We literally write on Mylar, then once we surface, we transcribe them. So that's how we write underwater. You can do it too if you really want to. Any other questions? Well, if that's that, thank you once again for coming to the museum. Appreciate you taking time out of your evening. Please enjoy or have a safe ride back home as well. And hope to see you back here. Not even a question about the fish?
What kind of fish is that?
Actually, I don't know, but this is up in the Pine Street Barge Canal Breakwater Ship Graveyard. That's part of one of the shipwrecks out back.
Oh, nice.
And our next talk is August 14th. It's going to be from our collections manager.
This is about,
So in Bermuda, I went to